Laura Fox, production designer for the White Lotus. I feel like this was the ultimate pandemic show because it was ordered and filmed a year ago this time. So can you just talk about the circumstances that went into getting the show off the ground?
Well, when I got the call about the job, they'd already chosen the 4 seasons. I think HBO had approached Mike White about, can you maybe have something in your bag of tricks that might work for small pandemic, non-giant succession type shooting? And he had literally been thinking about a resort idea, not this one, and he rewrote it. But that's sort of where it came from, because I literally got on a plane after being in my house for 6 months, basically. I mean, it was prime pandemic time, and the hotel was closed. We were, for half of it, we were just there in the bubble.
So, and you had to do your quarantine at the hotel as well, right? Like the 4 seasons was where you like lived and worked.
Yeah, we
Right.
got to the hotel. There were like 7 people. I often say it was like the Shining by the Sea. And I get there and I have to then quarantine for like 10 days in my room, which you really could not complain about. You were gazing out at Hawaii. And I was just in there. I had all this fabric I had shipped from Hawaii, samples, and I'm literally taping it to the curtains, trying to figure out, because I'm going to get out of here in 10 days and have to design a set like that. So I would be taping everything up in my room, different fabrics for which set. And I would send them to my art director who was in quarantine. He would do a little photoshopping. Then my decorator who was in LA would send me pictures of furniture that coincided. It was just the weirdest.
What is it like? I mean, I guess like, it's weird to be in quarantine and like having to work like that and not seeing people, like you're just like emailing down the hall. But I like, working there or like living there, I feel like you also get to observe how like the facilities operate as well, right?
Well, it's weird. I mean, every job is different, as we just heard from so many great production designers. But this job was really different in that you can like walk on your set every day for a month, 2 months before you're shooting there. You're like so in it. It was strange. But the facility was not running for the first half. And that was really interesting. It was literally like, at first it was 10 of us, then the actors arrived, then the extras arrived, and then there were about 40 of us. And then halfway through our time there, the hotel opened. And you're like, wow, so this is how it worked. Because these kind of vast empty lobbies, it seemed kind of like old folks' homes suddenly became like hip places with bands and lighting. And so it was a unique experience, to say the least.
I love to talk about the aesthetics for each of the suites of the guests there, because I love like how you went for like prints and like patterns as well, because it like the whole resort like obviously is for like wealthy people, but there is also something like gauche about it, like the prints, and it fits the tone of the show as well. So can you talk about like how you landed on those like patterns? And obviously, the palm suite has a lot of palms, and pineapple suite has a lot of pineapples.
They sure do. It's such a funny job. So when I had my first call with Mike, he's like, I don't know, do we leave it? Because the hotel rooms are really they're lovely, but they're banal because 50 different types of people have to stay in there. So there's nothing, over the head. So we're on the phone. We're talking about the Madonna Inn meets the Four Seasons. Do you know the Madonna Inn? It's crazy, tacky place on the coast of California with rock rooms. And then we talked about, we had about Rich and Kitsch and do we just make it mundane or do we go for it? And I said, let's go for it. And so the pineapple and the palm were scripted because of that character's whole need to be in the better room. So like Jennifer's suite, the hibiscus suite, that came, Mike was great. He's like, well, if you find a better look, we can change the name of the room. So I just really started with fabric. And I had all these Hawaiian fabrics sent to me in LA, and I left swatches for my decorator. And then it just kept evolving from those fabrics. And then Alex, our great costume designer, would say, I hear you're using a lot of patterns. And I'm like, I hear you're using a lot of patterns. And then our patterns met and we were very excited. So it just became that kind of bold thing. And so there was, in each room, there was the headboard and the drapes, which was mostly the starting point of that room. And then we would build the color palette off of that, except the Tradewind suite actually started with the artwork, which brought the blues, because that was a famous, I found that Herb Canet is a famous 70s artist. And I'm like, oh my God, I love this stuff. And so once we got permission to use this, then that color and those patterns built from that, which also totally tied into what happened with Quinn the kid, which at one point Mike and I are like, are we too on the nose with the, the boats? And we said, no, let's go for it.
Well, you also have like Connie Britton's character like rearranging the room for her Zoom. So.
Listen, her picking up that turtle, rearranging was scripted, but picking up that turtle was not. So when I saw that on the show, I was like, oh my God, that's fantastic.
So how much were you allowed to change in the suites?
Well, we emptied them out completely and, just totally tried to create a bare canvas. That was also what was so exciting. You had so many things you couldn't do. And sometimes that's the mother of invention, Normally you go into a job with a ton of references. Here you just had to say, here's my references, this room, I'm going to work from it. And so no paint, which I think was a blessing. So it was really just getting as much of what existed in the room out, working with built-ins you couldn't get rid of, like the headboards we were recovering. I brought in coincidentally, I had a draper that lived in Hawaii who I'd worked with in Santa Fe of all things. And she moved in and just sewed 24 hours a day. So it was really all about fabric and furniture.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also kind of interesting because you talked about this before, like how usually hotel rooms aren't like really over the top, like decorated because it needs to be like for everyone, to be able to stay there. So did you try to, I guess, personalize a little bit? I guess like when like the guests stay there, they personalize it themselves, like their luggage and everything, and like
that's for sure. The luggage and the props were picked for every room, but as you kind of got to know the characters, the pineapple was always going to be the pineapple, but the thing that became interesting is the Palm Suite is literally one of the best rooms in the hotel. It has the best view. And the suite that it became the Pineapple Suite is really low ceilings. It's and it's got like a bunch of rooms you didn't see, and it's for families. And you have no view. And yet, because of his obsession with, I want what's best, I want more, then the room started building on that. And I'm like, you want more, you're going to get more. There's so many pineapples in that room that you don't even, I'm like, we're just going to keep pushing it. And so it became more about, instead of just like, oh, this looks good, that looks good, it became more like, you're giving up a beautiful room with beautiful live greens, with the best view of the ocean, for a room with a low ceiling and an over-the-top pineapple decor.
I thought that was like the cheeky payoff of it, because it's like the build up to seeing this pineapple suite, like the entire season. It's like, is he ever going to get there? Are we going to see it? And we do. And it's like, I would have just stayed in the other room.
100%. So so you totally got that too. And then of course, Jennifer's room, her color palette was selected, but as we got to know her character, her room got a little quirkier in some of the set dressing and there's like a kind of a weird Medusa head with hibiscus growing out of it. Her bathroom is a mess, so it's funny because normally when you do a production design, a lot of rooms are so character driven, right? You want to do the layers and and see if you can see there, but in starting this, you didn't think that would ever be the case. It's a hotel. But as the process wore on, rooms became a little more specific to the story and to the character, just in subtle little ways. And that was kind of a neat, interesting discovery.
Well, I guess perhaps the most like personalized room is Armand's office. A
Yeah,
lot happens in there. So
it really
how did
makes it
you go
personal.
about, yeah, how did you go about like, designing that?
Uh, well, it's first trying to figure out which room. I mean, you're in a hotel. My gold room, my prop storage room was a giant ballroom, and so you're picking between ballrooms and then history of Hawaii. And it just became like he's a quirky guy. So, he had the sexy hula lamp, he had the colorful couch. There's a lot of there's old paintings of young surfers and things like that, and just continuing with the warmth and the greens because he's also a great guy. He just takes it a little bit in one direction, and then of course you want to create all the opportunities for what we knew what was going to happen in there.
Yeah, it also seems like a very like accessible area. Like it's not hard to like get to. Yeah.
No, you can literally, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So are you going to return for season two? It's
Oh,
a
I
new
would love
location.
to. I don't know where it's going to be, but it's exciting. It's like, where do you go from that? I mean, all we know, I guess we all know, is that Jennifer's returning because that was in the press, but that's really all I know so far. But of course, I would love to do it again.
Awesome. All right. Well, Laura, it's great speaking with you. Thank you so much.